There are about 9 billion of us humans right now, thriving everywhere from, the freezing tundras of the Arctic to the blistering heat of the Sahara.
Yeah, literally everywhere.
Right. But you will never see a chimpanzee building an igloo
Mm.
or like an orangutan just navigating a desert. We occupy virtually every single biome on the planet, while our closest evolutionary cousins are trapped in these very specific shrinking habitats. And today, we are answering why.
Which really points to our species' ultimate biological superpower, which is adaptability. I mean, our bodies can survive and function in almost any environment Earth has to offer.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so thrilled you're here with us. Our mission for you today is to really unpack how your unique body really works, why we all look and function so differently, and paradoxically, how our underlying biology actually unites us all.
Yeah, and to do that, we are synthesizing some just incredible material today. We're looking at excerpts from Herman Pontzer's brand new 2025 book, Adaptable, How Your Unique Body Really Works and Why Our Biology Unites Us.
Such a good book.
It's amazing. We're also pulling from a great analytical essay on the text and a live science interview with Pontzer himself, who is a professor of evolutionary anthropology and global health over at Duke University.
And a really quick timely note for you today is March 30th, 2026, which is a huge day because Adaptable is actually a finalist for the PEN E.O. Wilson Literary Science Writing Award.
Oh, wow, right.
Yeah. The winner is announced tomorrow, so we are absolutely crossing our fingers for him.
Definitely.
Because the way this material breaks down the human machine is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, to figure out how we manage to survive in literally every corner of the Earth, we first have to look inward at this bizarre, kind of underappreciated machinery running quietly inside you right now.
Yeah, the story of our global takeover really starts at that microscopic level. We tend to focus on the brain, when we talk about human dominance, but it's really the everyday miracles of basic biology that keep that brain alive in hostile environments.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to start with an organ most people completely ignore until something goes wrong, which is the kidneys.
Oh, yeah.
Pontzer calls them the forgotten essential workers of the body. And I mean, I always knew they filtered waste, but looking at the actual mechanics just kind of broke my brain a little bit.
It is wild.
It's like the ultimate built-in industrial water filtration system. We are talking about an organ that filters 180 liters of water every single day.
Yeah.
That's 47.5 gallons.
It's an astronomical volume. To put that in perspective, your entire blood volume is being completely filtered and scrubbed dozens of times a day.
Dozens of times.
Right, so your kidneys are packed with roughly 1 million of these tiny filtering units called nephrons. They essentially push the blood through these microscopic meshes under really high pressure, squeezing out water, salts, waste, all of that.
Just constantly running.
Constantly. And this is the genius part. They painstakingly reabsorb exactly the amount of water and minerals your body needs at that exact millisecond. Yeah, sending only the absolute excess waste down to the bladder.
The irony here is just too good. Because people spend hundreds of dollars on, expensive wellness detox supplements, right? Or these specialized teas to flush out their system.
Oh, but detox teas, yeah.
Exactly. Meanwhile, your kidneys are just sitting right there, running the equivalent of a municipal water treatment plant, doing it for free, and doing it infinitely better than any supplement ever could.
And we have this hyper-efficient system for a very specific evolutionary reason. I mean, humans evolved primarily in dry environments.
Right, the savannas.
Exactly. If you picture early hominins ranging far and wide across the African savannas to forage and hunt, they were sweating profusely to stay cool. And they were away from immediate water sources for really long stretches of time.
So they couldn't just hang out by a river all day like other primates?
No, they couldn't. Our bodies had to learn to regulate water balance across our entire physiological system in a way that is fundamentally different from other apes.
We just became masters of fluid conservation.
Out of pure necessity, yeah. The kidneys learned to squeeze every last drop of utility out of the water we did consume so we could just keep moving.
Which means we're essentially built for extreme dehydration.
Yeah.
But, fluid is really only half the survival equation.
Yeah.
If you are running across that savanna or climbing a mountain, your muscles are screaming for oxygen.
Oh, absolutely.
And that brings up another forgotten hero organ, which is the spleen. Honestly, if you asked me yesterday what the spleen does, I probably would have just mumbled something vague about the immune system.
Well, I mean, it definitely plays a crucial role in immune defense, filtering blood for pathogens. But the spleen also acts as a biological backup oxygen tank.
A backup tank. That is so cool.
Right. It's essentially this spongy reservoir for oxygen-rich red blood cells. When your body is suddenly subjected to massive physical stress or an oxygen-deprived environment, say, traveling to a high altitude, the spleen physically contracts.
Like it squeezes itself.
Exactly. It squirts a reserve of these red blood cells directly into your bloodstream.
So it's literally like having a reserve fuel tank that dumps extra gas into the engine the second you start to stall out.
That's a great way to put it. And the spleen can actually physically enlarge over time to hold a greater reservoir of those cells if the environmental demand requires it constantly.
Okay, so if the spleen acts as an internal scuba tank for oxygen, what happens when a human population actually makes the water their primary environment?
Right. That takes us from the general baseline of human biology into the realm of extreme environmental adaptation.
And this is where we get introduced to the Sama people of the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
And you might also see them referred to in the scientific literature as the Bajau or Bajau Laut.
Mm-hmm.
They are essentially sea nomads. They live their entire lives on boats and in the ocean, and foraging underwater is just completely central to their survival.
Right. It's their whole way of life.
Exactly. And over generations of this breath hold diving, they didn't just get better at holding their breath through sheer practice or just expanding their lung capacity. They actually evolved significantly larger spleens.
And what's fascinating here is the sheer mechanistic precision required for a physical change like that to become permanently encoded in a population. This is a textbook case of true local adaptation.
Because it's not just random.
No, not at all. A really common misconception about evolution is that animals just adapt to whatever they do a lot.
Right.
But local adaptation doesn't happen randomly, and it requires incredibly strict, very narrow conditions to actually take hold.
So I can't just go swim in a pool for 10 years and expect my kids to be born with massive spleens.
Sadly, no. First, the trait in this case, specific gene variants that instruct the body to grow a larger spleen, must provide a massive survival and reproductive advantage in one specific place.
Okay, so one specific place.
Right. For the Sama, a larger spleen means more blood oxygen during long dives. More oxygen means they can stay underwater longer, catch more fish, feed their families better, and ultimately have more children who survive to pass on those specific genes.
Okay, so there's a very clear survival benefit. What's the second condition?
Generational time. Natural selection is painfully slow.
Like thousands of years slow.
Exactly. You need that same environmental pressure, the need to dive for food to remain constant over hundreds or thousands of years, so those gene variants can slowly become dominant in that specific population.
Got it. And the third requirement is the one that really blew my mind in the sources. The environment has to be stable and geographically bounded enough to prevent gene flow.
Yes.
How does gene flow actually work mechanically?
Think of gene flow as the shuffling of the genetic deck when different populations interbreed.
Okay.
If the Sama people were constantly moving inland, marrying, and having children with agricultural populations who never dive, the gene variants for those larger spleens would get diluted.
Because the inland kids wouldn't need a massive spleen to farm.
Exactly. They would wash out into the wider genetic pool. But because the oceanic environment is so specific and the Sama's lifestyle keeps them relatively bounded to the sea, that specific allele gets concentrated. Gene flow is restricted by the environment itself.
That makes a lot of sense. And we see this with a few other genuine local adaptations that meet these same really strict criteria, like Himalayan populations adapting to high altitudes.
Oh, perfect example.
The Himalayas have been thousands of meters tall for all of human prehistory. The air is always thin, the pressure is completely constant, so traits that help process oxygen more efficiently get locked in over millennia.
Yeah, and another really elegant example is skin pigmentation. The gradient of ultraviolet radiation from the sun is heavily concentrated at the equator and very scarce near the poles.
Right.
Darker skin is a local adaptation that protects against severe UV damage and the destruction of essential folate near the equator.
Makes sense.
But as ancient human populations moved toward the poles where sunlight is really weak, they needed lighter skin to permit the penetration of UV rays required to synthesize vitamin D.
So it's a biological trade-off. Both variations are highly advantageous, but only in their specific stable environments. You need the UV shield at the equator, and you need the UV sponge at the poles. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because I was stuck on something while reading this. If adapting to one specific place is so powerful, why don't we see isolated groups with supercharged hearts or massive hyper-efficient brains? Like, if local adaptation works by amplifying what's useful, shouldn't natural selection have localized those traits too? Like, why isn't there a specific town somewhere where everyone just has an indestructible cardiovascular system?
That tension is exactly how we prove how gene flow operates on a global scale. If a trait is universally beneficial, it doesn't stay localized.
Because it's just good everywhere.
Right. There is no environment on Earth, no desert, no tundra, no ocean, where having a weak heart or diminished cognitive ability is a survival advantage.
So a good heart is a good heart everywhere.
Precisely. Any genetic variant that enhances baseline cardiovascular function or general brain power is universally advantageous. And because humans are a highly mobile species that interbreeds constantly, those universally good traits spread broadly across the entire species over evolutionary time.
They just ripple outward.
Exactly. They do not get trapped or clustered in specific isolated populations. If a mutation makes a heart 10% more efficient, it eventually sweeps through the whole human race.
This makes total sense, and honestly, it completely dismantles some really harmful claims that were circulating back in the 1990s. Some researchers tried to argue that Black Americans might carry localized alleles that predispose them to hypertension or heart disease.
Yeah, that was a big debate.
And the underlying flawed implication there was that evolutionary pressure somehow shaped cardiac function differently in West African populations compared to European ones.
And that claim collapses entirely when you apply the mechanistic rules of local adaptation. I mean, the physiological requirements for pumping blood and the evolutionary selection pressures on the human heart have been identical for our entire species.
There is no isolated environment that selects for a defective cardiovascular system.
Exactly. It's universally important.
And the sources point out that the same biological logic dismantles claims about population-level differences in IQ. Cognitive intelligence has been heavily selected for continuously since Homo sapiens first walked the Earth.
It's our primary survival tool.
Right. Any traits making us smarter spread equally everywhere. The author flat out calls these myths ridiculous and dangerous.
Which is why this framework is such a vital mental toolkit for you as a listener. It teaches us that human diversity is multi-layered. The systems in our bodies evolved independently under very different environmental pressures.
So you can't just lump them all together.
No, you can't. Knowing someone's skin pigmentation, which adapted specifically to local UV radiation, tells you absolutely nothing reliable about their cardiovascular risk or their cognitive profile.
Because the heart and the brain didn't adapt locally. They adapted universally. It's sort of like assuming that because a car is painted red, it must have a V8 engine.
Exactly.
The paint job and the engine were built on completely different evolutionary assembly lines.
They vary along completely different axes.
So if our underlying genetics are so heavily shared, and our hearts and brains are built on the exact same universal blueprints, why do health outcomes vary so wildly today?
That's the big question.
Right. Why are some people perfectly healthy while others are dealing with chronic, debilitating ailments? This shifts us from deep evolutionary time, like millions of years, into modern developmental time. We're looking at the clash between our ancient bodies and our current lives.
And to really grasp this, we have to rethink what genetics actually means mechanically.
I really like the analogy the sources used here.
Yeah.
Because genetics isn't a fixed, unchangeable blueprint. It's not a rigid destiny. Instead, the hand you're dealt at birth gives you a universe of possibilities.
Right, a universe of possibilities.
But that universe does have hard limits. Like, no amount of perfect childhood nutrition or elite athletic training could ever make someone 8 feet tall. The genes set the outer boundaries. But it is nurture, the environment you actually grow up in, that dictates exactly where you land inside that universe.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we hit the concept of the evolutionary mismatch. Herman Pontzer spent years working with the Hadza people in Tanzania who are contemporary hunter-gatherers.
And studying their lifestyle is so important.
It's essential. It provides a crucial living baseline for human physiology.
Because for millions of years, our hominin ancestors lived exactly like that.
Exactly. And we need to look at what that environment actually entails. It involves constant, relentless physical activity just to acquire food. It involves a diet of wild, fibrous, completely unprocessed foods.
Sounds exhausting, honestly.
It is. And it involves a world that is fundamentally rich in microbes, meaning frequent exposure to a wide range of pathogens, dirt, parasites, all of that. Our immune systems, our metabolisms, and our bone densities were absolutely fine-tuned for those exact inputs over millennia.
You look at us today, I mean, most of us are just sitting in climate-controlled rooms. We have Thousands of calories of ultra-processed food sitting 10 feet away in a refrigerator.
Yeah, we don't even have to stand up.
We don't have to walk if we don't want to. We use antibacterial soap to scrub every surface.
Yeah.
And, the point here isn't to make a moral judgment. Nobody is saying we should all abandon modern medicine and go live in the woods.
Right. No one is saying that.
It's a mechanistic observation about what happens to a machine when you completely change its operating environment.
The body is responding completely rationally to the inputs it is receiving. The problem is the inputs are entirely novel. The modern environment has changed so drastically in just the last century that it has completely outpaced our biological ability to adapt.
Because evolution is slow.
Yeah.
But industrialization was incredibly fast.
Exactly. This mismatch is what produces maladaptive outcomes. We're seeing skyrocketing rates of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, severe autoimmune allergies. These are ailments that appear to have been exceedingly rare before the agricultural and industrial transitions.
Our ancient bodies are literally short-circuiting because they just don't know what to do with a sedentary lifestyle and a massive surplus of sugar. And there is another layer to this that is genuinely intense. It's not just about how our bodies react in the moment. The environment can chemically rewrite how our biology operates long-term.
Yes.
We're talking about epigenetics.
Epigenetics is like the ultimate interface where nurture physically alters nature. It's the study of how environmental stresses like a really poor diet, psychological trauma, or exposure to toxins can actually alter gene expression.
But it's not changing the DNA itself, right?
Crucially, no. It does not change your underlying DNA sequence. The code stays exactly the same. But the environment adds these chemical tags to the DNA, which physically tightens or loosens how the DNA is wrapped around proteins inside your cells.
So it's literally blocking the body from reading certain genes or forcing it to read other ones on overdrive.
Exactly.
It's like having a master soundboard for your genes, and the stress of your environment is physically sliding the volume faders up and down.
That's a perfect analogy. It switches certain genes on or off, and those chemical alterations can persist for your entire lifetime. Like a high-stress environment can permanently leave the volume turned way up on your cortisol production.
But the real kicker is what happens to the next generation. Because in laboratory mice, researchers have proven definitively that these epigenetic changes can actually be passed down.
Yes, transgenerational inheritance.
The environmental stress a mother mouse experiences, say, a severe lack of food physically alters her eggs. Her offspring are born with those same epigenetic chemical tags already in place.
They inherit the metabolic adaptation to starvation, even if they're born into an environment with plenty of food.
Which is wild.
It is. Now, human studies are notoriously difficult because our generations take decades to observe, so the science isn't completely settled yet. But there are very strong, tantalizing hints that this transgenerational epigenetic inheritance happens in humans too.
So the trauma or the dietary stress of a parent can actually leave a chemical transgenerational scar on the child before they are even born.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? When we synthesize all of this, the incredible filtration of the kidneys, the Sama divers evolving larger spleens, the debunking of biological myths, and the reality of this evolutionary mismatch, what is the real takeaway?
Well,
I mean, we don't need to chase fad diets or buy into expensive pseudoscientific cleanses. We just need to understand our baseline biology.
yeah, it's really about finding comfort in the scientific consensus. Science has done incredible work over the past few centuries to figure out how to keep our ancient bodies healthy in this bizarre modern world.
A prime example being vaccines. I mean, we've apparently been debating them for 300 years, despite the biological evidence being overwhelmingly clear that they are one of the single greatest public health victories in human history.
Oh, absolutely.
Understanding how adaptable yet vulnerable our biology is really helps us trust those consensus ideas. It gives you the armor to navigate a world that is just full of biological misinformation.
And as we close out this deep dive, there's a lingering thought that stems from everything we've covered today. We started by praising adaptability as the superpower that let us conquer Earth.
Right.
But if our modern, sedentary, hyper-clean lifestyles are already creating the severe evolutionary mismatch that makes us sick, and if epigenetics proves that environmental impacts can be passed down transgenerationally, are we currently, right now, rewriting the biological baseline?
Oh, wow.
Are we passing our modern mismatch onto the next generation before they are even born?
That is a wild thought to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll catch you next time.